Hi, everybody. Good morning. I'm very excited to be here. My name is Brianna Gilmore, like Susan introduced me, and I am the program associate here at the Institute for the Study of the Americas with Building Integrated Communities. And today we're going to be talking about how to collect data on the languages spoken in our communities. So our agenda for the next 20 minutes or so includes a brief overview about the census, the American Community Survey, and public use microdata. We will also be using the town of Chapel Hill as an example as we walk through what key languages are spoken in the town and specifically by limited English proficient households. So that's kind of what we're going to be looking at today. And if you have any questions, feel free to write them in the chat. And like Susan said, we'll do a Q&A afterwards. So first, just a little background on the census. The census occurs every 10 years, with the most recent being the 2020 census. And according to many demographic experts, the total count in the 2020 census was successful. However, the data for subgroups and some states is flawed by undercounts, overcounts, and incorrect counts. Specifically, there was an undercount of individuals identifying as Hispanic and an overcount of people identifying as Asian. So no census has ever been perfect. But it is important just to recognize some of the flaws in the most recent count. And if you're interested, I'll provide a Pew Research article that kind of dives into it a little bit deeper on some of the flaws in the 2020 census. But for our purposes, we're mainly going to use the American Community Survey. So the image on the right-hand side shows the 3 survey questions. And these are the same questions that have been asked since the 1980 census. However, starting in 2005, the language spoken at home question was transferred to the American Community Survey. So that is why we're going to be using the ACS or American Community Survey for our research. The ACS is a nationwide survey designed to provide communities with reliable and timely social, economic, housing, and demographic data every year. It's designed and coordinated by the Census Bureau, and there are 2 types of ACS publications. You have the ACS 1-year estimates and the ACS 5-year estimates. The 1-year estimates are data that have been collected over a 12-month period, 1 year, and are available for geographic areas with at least 65,000 people. The 1-year supplemental estimates are simplified versions for geographic areas with at least 20,000 people. So they have kind of some smaller supplemental estimates for the 1-year period, but we don't really need to worry too much about that. On the ACS 5-year estimates, those represent data collected over a period of 60 months, and that's for geographic areas with fewer than 65,000 residents. So while both estimates are good estimates, the primary advantage of using the multi-year estimates, so the 5-year estimates, is an increased statistical reliability of data compared to that of a single-year estimates, and particularly for small geographic areas and small population subgroups. So, in general, the 1-year estimates are more likely to show year-to-year fluctuations, while the consecutive 5-year estimates are more likely to show a smooth trend because, all of those years are in a series overlapping or connecting by one another. So generally speaking, for our purposes, I'm going to recommend using the 5-year estimates just so that it doesn't have those year-to-year fluctuations for the variables of the languages that we're looking for. So now what we're going to do is we're going to examine how this question 14, and its 3 parts, A, B, and C, and how they code for language. So first, the question is, does this person speak a language other than English at home? There are 2 answer categories, yes, no. Those who respond no will skip questions 14B and 14C and move on to question 15. Those who respond yes are directed to answer question 14B, which asks, what is this language? And there is a write-in box for respondents to write in their spoken language. Then the third question asks, how well does this person speak English? There are 4 answer categories: very well, not well, and not at all. So these 3 questions are used to tabulate all of the language use and English speaking ability information available from the American Community Survey. And diving a little bit deeper into the data collected via question 14, part B, they are coded into different categories. Generally, linguists recognize over 7,000 languages in the world. So as respondents report new languages, more codes will be added to this list, which is exactly what happened in 2016 as the code list was revised to match the International Organization for Standardization. So the number of possible codes was increased from 382 to the number on your screen, 1,333. So that was in 2016, that large jump of new languages being coded. And so I can only imagine that in the next 10, 20 years, that possible list of codes will increase as well. And from those 1,333 languages, they are coded into 42 group classifications. These 42 group classifications are further coded into one of the 4 broad categories that generally are seen when you look at census data. We have Spanish, other Indo-European languages, Asian and Pacific Island languages, and other languages. So, for example, Haitian, Russian, and Hindi languages are coded as other Indo-European languages. Mandarin, Burmese, and Hmong are coded as Asian and Pacific Island languages. And Arabic, Somali, and Wolof are coded as other. So that kind of gives you an understanding of what some of the specific languages are that are in these broader categories. And the determination of whether to show an individual language, such as Spanish, or collapse it into an aggregated category depends on the size of the population in the United States speaking that language at home. Later on in this presentation, I will show you how to find the specific languages spoken in your community as we break down those broad categories. So now we're going to move on to the third question of question 14C, which asks, how well does this person speak English? This represents the person's own perception of their ability, of their own English speaking ability. And so the Census Bureau reports data based on the 4 categories of English speaking ability as very well, not well, and not at all. And the distinction between respondents who reported speaking English very well and those who report speaking less than very well, those are the people who are categorized as limited English proficient individuals. And this is a distinction that comes from the English Language Proficiency Survey conducted by the Census Bureau in 1982. The English Language Proficiency Survey concluded that those who speak English less than very well had some difficulty with the test administered in that survey. So therefore, that became the structure and limit to when they have defined limited English proficient individuals as less than very well. And like we said earlier, using some of the asset-based language, limited English proficient individuals, LEP is the government identified terminology. And so that is what we will be using in this presentation. And when you are doing your research, you will have this terminology on the data, on the tables that you find. And so there are two measurements. The first one's on here. The individual measurement is listed here from lep.gov. This states we have defined limited English proficient individuals as the population 5 years or older who self-identify as speaking English less than very well. Then we have a household measurement, and the household measurement is one in which no member 14 years or over, one only speaks English, or two speaks a non-English language or speaks English very well. In other words, all members 14 years and old or over have at least some difficulty with English. By definition, English-only households cannot belong to this group. And now that we have a general overview of how the data is collected and the definitions of the variables, let's dive into how we're going to find this data. So first, we're going to go to our data.census.gov. And on this website, you'll have a search bar in which you can search a lot of different tables and maps and rates from all over the United States, and with various census records. So you could go back to probably the 1960s, most likely. And for our purposes, we are going to search the language spoken at home in blank. Today, our example will be Chapel Hill, North Carolina. When you all do this, you'll have your own locale to mention. So then step 2 is selecting the table. So once you search, something like this will appear. And on the left-hand side is a filter section where you can see that language spoken at home and Chapel Hill, North Carolina have been selected based on our search. On the right-hand side appears a general profile of the location. And in the middle, we can see the first 3 tables listed are language spoken at home, characteristics of people by language spoken at home, and limited English speaking households. And then quickly looking above the table's headings, you'll see the 2021 American Community Survey 5-year estimates. This should be automatically populated as it's the most recent data available in the search engine. However, if you want to choose other surveys from different years, you can click on View All 12 Products under the table selection and select which survey you'd like to see. For our purposes, we can simply click on the language spoken at home section. And this is the table that we see. So once you click on that language spoken at home, the table will pop up alongside the page. And as you can see, the data is separated into 2 categories: population 5 years and over, and citizens 18 years and over. To best serve all of our residents, we are interested in the data under the population 5 years and over category. So we're going to just block out that section and see a little bit further. So it's further separated by speak only English and then speak other languages than English. So we see our 4 broad categories: Spanish, other Indo-European languages, Asian and Pacific Island languages, and other languages. And I do want to quickly mention that Hindi, as I listed earlier, is based on the determination from the census, it is included in the other Indo-European languages category. That is what the census has decided. There's a 42 category breakdown, and that is the determination that the census decided to use. And so, although that is not, we'll go further into kind of actually finding specifically Hindi, it will pop up on its own. But I did want to just clarify that it is not a language from the Census Bureau. It was not identified as Asian and Pacific Island languages. It was listed under other Indo-European languages. So in general, we need to dive further to better understand what specific languages are being spoken, which leads us to this public use microdata set. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to this website, data.census.gov/mdat/pound. And on the home page, you'll see a box that says select a data set and vintage. Our data set will be the ACS 5-year estimate public use microdata sample. And the vintage is the year. So we'll select 2021 as that's the most recent data available. And the ACS public use microdata, or PUMS, files are a set of records from individual people or housing units with disclosure protection enabled so that individuals and housing units can't be identified. So it'll give us a greater understanding of the individual languages being spoken, but it does have that protection enabled so individuals can't be identified through this. So once we have selected our data set and selected our vintage, we will click search and we'll select our variables. So a list like this will pop up, and as you can see, the search box that says search is not enabled. On this website, it's currently not enabled. However, we can use the box to the left where there are these pre-tabulated categories. So we will select language spoken at home, and 12 different variables will appear. And we're going to focus on the household analysis first, and then we'll look at individuals. And I'm splitting those up, and you'll see why we have to split them up in that way later on. So as you can see, we have the 12 variables, and now I'm going to go through what variables we're going to use and what we recommend for the household analysis. So first, we have HHL, which is household language. And as you can see, it is the same breakdown that we saw earlier into those 4 broad categories. So that's not really that important for us and our purposes. So we're not going to check that one. Just wanted to point it out, and we're not going to check that one because we want to have the further, more detailed data. Next is the LANP, which is language other than English spoken at home. There are 2 choices, one with 131 variables and one with 139 variables. And when you're choosing your data here, make sure you choose the 139 because it actually will, it's more specific in its data and it's language other than English spoken at home. There's another LANP that is just language spoken at home. So just make sure you have that 139 checked. And next, we're going to click on the LNGI variable, which is limited English speaking households. And as we can see, this reflects the household variable definition that we saw earlier about at least one person in the household 14 and over speaks English only, or speaks English very well, or 2, no one in the household 14 and over speaks English only or speaks English very well. So now that we have checked our 2 variables, LANP and LNGI, we're going to go to our next section, which is to select geography. Now, the geography is what's interesting. The only options are region, division, state, and public use microdata, or Pumas. And the Pumas are the smallest area available in order to protect the privacy of residents. The Pumas are split into census tracts and counties that make up a population of 100,000 or more. So for example, once I click on the Pumas tab, this list appears. And as you can see, some of the counties are combined, and larger populated areas like the city of Raleigh are actually split into separate Pumas. So the city of Raleigh team, you'll need to select all of the Pumas that encompass the city of Raleigh. And with our walkthrough example in Chapel Hill does not have 100,000 people or more. And so the Puma for our purposes is the Orange County Chapel Hill Town Puma. And once you've selected your geography, you can click on the bottom right-hand corner, a button that says View Table. And this is what the table should look like. I do want to point out this weighting category where my arrow is pointing. Currently, it's selected as a housing unit weight, which is great because the variable limited English speaking household is a household variable. All of the variables will need to be assigned a weight because the records represent a sample of the population. And the weight is a numeric variable expressing the number of housing units or people that an individual microdata record represents. So because we chose a household variable, we need to use the household weight. If you choose to download this data file in Excel, you'll have another option to choose your weight, and just make sure you select housing unit weight. So we're going to look a little further into the data here. And so looking at the Pumas of Orange County, you may want to organize your data by largest to smallest, which can be done by clicking on the box with the definition, and an arrow will pop up. So this down arrow suggests that the data is ordered from largest to smallest. And looking at the row here with Spanish, we read this data as 8,476 households speak Spanish, and 1,382 households that speak Spanish do not have anyone 14 or over who speaks English very well. Because remember, a limited English speaking household is defined as a household where no one in the household speaks English very well. So that first box on that question 14C is really what defines our numbers here. So this is your housing information. And now we're going, and as you can see, it has further languages here. So we have Spanish, we have Chinese, Korean, Japanese, and Burmese listed, which is way more than what the 4 broad categories can tell us. Additionally, the NA/GQ/vacant essentially means it was either illegible or no answer was provided. So just keep that in mind. And so now we're going to go back to our microdata homepage, and we're going to look for the individual analysis. So on here, it's the same information, 2021, in a 5-year ACS survey. And we're going to select the same language other than English spoken at home variable, which is 139 different options. And then we're going to select ENG, which is ability to speak English. And these 2 variables will produce the individual analysis. And so here is again what your table looks like. As you can see, the person weight is selected, and this should be automatic given that the ability to speak English is an individual variable. However, double check to make sure that your weight is correct. And Now looking at the table, we have language on the left side and the ability to speak English on the right and on the top. So because the definition of limited English proficient individuals are those who respond with their ability to speak English as well, not well, or not at all, what I would recommend is downloading this data file in order to remove that very well column and sum the well, and not at all. That feature is not available on this website, so downloading it to an Excel document or another form of files like that will be best. And so we're going to walk through a little bit on Excel. So downloading your table view, as you can see here, you have the option to choose person weight or housing unit weight. We're going to use person weight because that's our variable. And this is what your Excel document will look like. You'll have the source at the top, the weight that it was selected, and the universe/selected geographies, which is our Orange County Chapel Hill. And what I will do is to create a column on the right-hand side of the not at all column. And we're going to enter the sum equation and sum the well, and not at all, and that will give us the total for that language there. And a quick trick, if Excel is not something that you use a lot, you can, on the box that is green and highlighted, there's this little smaller green box square, and you can click on that and drag it down the column, and that will copy the equation. So you don't have to type it in for every single language that's listed there. You can slide the equation, slide the little marker down, and the equation will copy over. So next, what we want to do is we want to sort the data from most to least. So you can highlight the total LEP or sum column and select the sort and filter option, select largest to smallest, and when that sort warning pops up, make sure you click select expand the selection. That way you can actually, it'll organize all of the data and not just that one column. And so as you can see now, this table is organized by the total LEP category from largest to smallest. And as you can see, the top languages are very similar from the individual or from the household language as well. Spanish, Chinese, Korean, Japanese, Burmese, and so on. And now what I want to do is just look very briefly at comparing those datas. So we have individual analysis on the left, household analysis on the right. And as you can see, we can clearly identify some of our strategic languages. Like I said, Spanish, Chinese, Korean, Japanese, Burmese, Haitian, Arabic. And so this kind of allows us to look at both. You kind of can see how both are beneficial. And now looking specifically at our language access plan for Chapel Hill, I'm just going to show you some of the tables that they populated and that they created when they were making their plan. So on the left-hand side is the ACS 2021 5-year estimates that we just populated in our household variables. And then on the right-hand side, you have two tables, Table 2, language spoken at home by Chapel Hill residents, and then Table 3, top 5 of non-English languages and percent of LEP population in Chapel Hill. And so this data was collected in the 2017 and 2015 data surveys, but we can clearly see that there are some similarities, even though it's been a few years. So we have Spanish that is labeled here, Chinese, Korean, which is also copied here, Spanish, Chinese, and Korean. So by collecting data through the Census.gov and the Microdata platform, you should be able to collect all of this data now. And in addition to collecting the data via those data sources, we highly recommend 3 other local systems to gather further information to help inform what strategic languages are needed. Contacting your refugee resettlement agencies, those organizations can share past arrival information, and they can also project future arrivals who may be coming to your area. Additionally, the education system, ESL coordinators, they have data on their current English language learner students, and they can help identify what languages are being spoken other than English. And then our health department, social services and health departments can also have data on refugees arriving directly to the county. This table and the data here was actually provided by Susan when she was working at the Orange County Health Department when Chapel Hill was doing their language access plan. And so, as you can see, this kind of helps also identify what other languages may be spoken and cultural understanding too of immigrants and refugees. And also, if your own agency has some data that maybe transportation has a form that people fill out on what languages they prefer to speak, and you'll be able to find out a lot of this stuff through your assessment, which is what we will start talking about next. Additionally, if you have like an informations department, or if you want to play around in GIS, there's a lot of different areas that you can look further into to kind of identify core areas that may need either extra assistance or to target information in those critical languages.